It's been about an hour and 20 minutes since we finished playing, but it's been 5 months, I think, since the previous venture. So, I took some time to try and organize some thoughts and take some notes, and so I'll be reading from my notes for most of this. Um, it, it's been a lot of time, 5 months. Now, surprisingly, with the aid of those nice little rule summary documents that I did for myself, I was able to remember a lot of the rules. Um, After a little bit of studying yesterday, we got this last minute opportunity to play. So we it was very last minute, so we didn't really prepare in advance. We just uh, said, fine, let's do it. With limited prep time, reviewing some rules and looking over the characters, that's all I did in terms of prep. I felt enough confidence with the system, having played it a couple of times, and with a little reread of the summaries, I think we could fake it at least. Um, the one concern was the characters. Did we remember enough? So, I didn't have time to go and listen to every single other episode we played. I knew that Hadrick was out of the question because I'd played him last, so it was not going to be Hadrick. Um, and so, character selection came across. Ivan gave us a little summary of the lowest rated event on the venture, right? So we could make character selection of that. So I could have gone with a spellcaster again with Kai Ernst, but I didn't really feel like playing another wizard. There's too many options for wizardry open. It's 2 points really. First, is too many options, and if I'm giving that many options, I'm gonna be tempted to look for a magical solution out of whatever it is that we're doing, and I didn't want that. I wanted the constraint of a fighter. Somebody would have to, with limited options, have to make the most of that. So that was a real strong drive for me, particularly since this is my last time as player. I'll be running the next 2 sessions. And so, and the other thing is, of course, if you play a wizard, it's much harder to play, right? So you have to be looking at spells and be on your toes because you have the entire catalog available of spells at once. Um, and so it was going to be easier to play a fighter, but in spite of that, I've played out of the 4 sessions that I played as a player, we did half and half. We did wizard 2 of those, right? And I had done auto previously, so I figured I would try a fighter type. I wanted to play Anselm, but I knew that Anthony hadn't played his character yet, and we sort of had made up this agreement of let's give him first choice. Although theoretically I could have picked Anselm. It worked out fine. It wasn't too bad. My only concern was I remembering Ingolf correctly? And if you saw the end of the actual play video, we kind of discuss it for a bit. And so I honestly remember little bits of the time when Ingolf had that problem with the wizards, not the wizards, the noblemen in the ancient keep up in the freezing mountains. And so I remember the frustration that he had because he couldn't really. There was a moment of powerlessness where he couldn't affect the gentry. He had no way to make him do as he wished. And so I sort of remember that. And his character trait is shy, which I decided he was going to rebel a little bit against that shyness because of the powerlessness that he felt the last time around. So I figured, it's okay if I play him a bit more aggressively because he's got that feeling of I couldn't do anything then, can I do something now? So so that was my only note to self, right, to do that. This also brings to mind, the experience as of play as a player. Ron Edwards, the game designer, frequently makes a note of, how was the communal experience? I don't think he uses that term, but I think that's what he means. I've heard him speaking in interviews of, when he asks people, tell me about the game, tell me how the game goes. And he has this test where he listens to see if the guy says, well, my character did this, and I did that, and I did the other thing, and the other characters aren't mentioned, right? And so he counts as more as a success when people say, well, my character did this, but my friend's character did this other thing, which was awesome, and together we beat the enemy, right? So he looks for that more sort of, I think, selfish experience, right, of what I did, and this was I playing by myself or was I playing with others? Were we playing together, right? My first, there's been a couple of games where it has felt very me in my head. I am aware of what the others are doing, but perhaps not hyper aware because I'm a little bit too much into my character, thinking in terms of what am I gonna do next, what my options are, and so like that session with Ingolf, I remember what he was trying to do, but I don't remember the specifics, and that's good and bad, because that was the same session where I had a really deep personal experience playing Otto, right, with a little girl, and so that whole thing, was very, it sort of consumed it made me focus down really strongly on that character. There was a lot of bleed there, and so I was a little bit absorbed in my own stuff and not really playing with Ivan. That's good and bad. The good thing is it's a very powerful, very strong personal thing. The bad thing is I'm not playing with Ivan, right? It's not a communal thing, like Ron likes to say. And, but it's some sessions go one way, some sessions go the other way. I've been playing with Ivan for more than a year now, so it still feels, it's great. It's no problem, right? I feel it's okay if one session goes like that, right? The previous session with Anthony was also a bit like that, where Anthony and Kai Ernst were doing their thing with the gentry, and Hadrick, being not of the same social stratum, was doing his own thing as well. And I felt that thing again. It was very focused down into what I'm doing, and immersion into the character and the scene, and absorption with my own concerns, at the expense of am I playing with Anthony, which I really like doing because we don't. I think I made a note of how many times I've actually played with Anthony as a fellow player. And it's 3 times only. Played a Star Trek game way back many, many moons ago. And the previous venture and this one. So, in the previous one, it was a little bit very down into the character. In this one, it was a little bit more removed. With the flip side, that it felt very communal. It was one of those where I can say now, Anselm and Ingolf did this, and then Anselm did this cool thing, and Ingolf did this thing, and together we did this thing. So now it more meets the criteria or Ron's criteria for, was it a communal thing? Were we playing together rather than me by myself playing my own little game and him by himself playing his own little game? So that's good. The flip side is it didn't feel quite as personal as before. This could be a number of factors. This could be, you know, uh, too much time has passed. We have this time constraint of we knew it was 3 hours tops. Although Ron will say you play best when you're under time constraint. I think, you know, we love to talk. We love to hear ourselves talk. We can go on for hours and hours, and we enjoy listening to each other. And we make videos, and we listen to each other's videos, and we'll have these long conversations that will go on for hours and hours at a time. So that's us. That's our style. But it also, there's a factor of time, and it serves to get you further into the character and the experience, right? We switched up the way we did things. Ivan has taken Ron's advice, and, you know, he narrated this brief introductory scene of us getting to the place, which was great, because I think it served to do what our friend, the CGA, Antoine, says. It's closing the magic circle, right? It's this moment of narration where you let go of the real world and enter this imaginary, you know, this shared imaginary space, right? And so we enter the fiction, and with Ivan's help, right? And then we're thrust right into opening scene, and this is what's going on. So it's a little bit of a cold start. And so perhaps, you know, that's also a contributing factor to this being slightly more removed, but it's still very powerful. The communal experience is good. This game, Ron notes that it's 2 to 6 players in 2.5 to 4 hours. And that's counting with the GM. So it's GM and 1 to 5 players plus a GM in that allotted time. And I find that we can really get this depth of playing. You know, 3 hours was about what we needed to get deep, meaningful play. I couldn't imagine this game with more players in this limited amount of time. It would have been even more superficial, I feel. Maybe I'm wrong. I never tried it. And again, maybe it's just us. Ron says, you guys need time constraints. Because I don't know if we can get this emotional play, right? If we just go boom, 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 and 4 people trying to talk all have interaction with the NPC or whatever it is. I don't know how that works. Unless everybody's split up into multiple scenes, and then it's a bunch of smaller, you know, scenes with less amount of people. So that still proves my point, right? You need few people and a lot of time to play this right, I think. We'll see how it goes. Let's see, what else? You know, we gathered some information. It was Ivan had to do a lot of exposition, which is fine, because to me that's part of the closing of the magic circle. There's an admonition that these games are not really investigative. There's no mystery to solve. But I think the gathering of information is really important. It's what grounds the fiction into reality, because we can't just go and, you know, there's a witch. We heard there's a witch. Where's the witch? Let's go get the witch, kill the witch. And, you know, there has to be context in order for this thing to matter. Otherwise, it's just D&D, right? There needs to be context. And even if we're playing D&D, I need context to play D&D. I cannot be like, okay, there's a monster, go kill it. And why are we killing this monster, right? We're looking for treasure because we're mercenaries. That's context. We can do that. We can be murder hobos if that's the context. But, of course, this is a different type of context, and these guys are definitely not murder hobos, so it's even more important for there to be a strong reason, and that's where the narration comes in. So then we go on to the scene with the witch, which it was fantastic. I loved the fact that this is the same woman, Feist, from the previous venture, and as I said, you know, previously at the end of the venture video itself, I just love the fact that she's changed, but she remains close enough to who she was before. that it's recognizable, it's fitting, it's similar location, it makes sense that it would be her, and her life circumstances have changed drastically thanks to our actions on the previous venture, which was great. It was really nice of Ivan to put her here, and I think it worked out wonderfully. The battle itself, it worked out much smoother than before. I think there's a function of time to learning things. I've found, I'm not really a musician, but I did learn to play a little bit of guitar and a little bit of music. And I found myself that at the beginning it was really hard, and then you would practice, and you reached a plateau, and you couldn't progress beyond that, no matter how much I practiced. So I would stop. And maybe 6 months or a year would go by, I'd pick it up again, and then I would go from zero to the plateau real quick, and then surpass the plateau until I reached a new one, and then I would stop, and a couple of years would go by, and I'd pick it up again, and it would just climb up real quick, and then surpass the plateau again. So there seems to be something, at least in me, where even if I study a lot, I'll get some level of comfort, hit a plateau, and then if I leave it be and come back to it and relearn the thing from scratch, and I just go back to where I was and immediately increase up a notch. So it seemed to hold true for the combat, at least. I think we were much better doing the combat. Of course, there were no spells cast, so that was interesting. It proved to be extremely deadly. Now, we've been told that this combat has been deadly, and we just saw it. It was a little too deadly, I think, in the sense that it was a bit anticlimactic. It was one, whoever goes first kills the witch, and I guess the dice contributed to that. And, the one-shot kill is not unfamiliar to us, but I was a bit disappointed because this was my last session as a player, and I really, really wanted to feel that Robert E. Howard combat, and I didn't get it. But, it's fine. The witch is dead. It's cool. It was satisfying, and it was great narration by Anthony, so that was pretty cool. So again, we have this talk and with Ivo, and once again, the beauty of the charm roll comes into effect. This entire game could have gone completely different had it not been for the result of the charm rolls and the recruitment of Ivo to our cause and the subsequent talk with Werther, the clan chief, getting him to go along with our plans. That was all a function of the charm roll. I opened my mouth midway through that conversation that Anthony had with Ivo, that Anselm had with Ivo, and almost ruined the whole thing because my charm roll was missed initially. But it felt like something I had to do. So that whole deal with Werther was driven by the romantic notions about the young king that Anselm has. But I share that. I think that's part of the charm of the young king. The young king is described very briefly, but I think he's described enough. He's the guy who's changing the paradigm of the region. He's doing things differently from everybody else. So he's breaking traditions and establishing new ideas. And so I think it fits. It fits that as a knight of the circle, my character would be all in with that idea of change and let's do something different. So I think it worked out fine. And then we went to the second battle with the haunt, and again it was swift and deadly. We were lucky that it was Werther who drew the wrath of the haunt, and so the haunt demonstrated his deadliness by destroying Werther immediately. It would have been interesting to see, instead of Werther having him attack one of us, and seeing how deadly the combat would have been on us. We were armed and ready for combat, but still, this is very swingy, so it could have gone either way, right? And so we had the chance to get in some attacks, and it was over real swiftly. So it was fun that it ended that way, and it was some interesting combat. But again, I am left, unfortunately, bereft of my Robert E. Howard combat. And again, I realized that, Robert E. Howard has the whole racism issue, and it's a big deal. So I can't recommend it indiscriminately to people because it is a big deal. The racism is there. It's kind of hard to miss. If you are someone who can get past it, for whatever reason that is, and I don't want to get on the specifics of how you could get past it. Some people can, some people cannot. And I think I could understand both points of views. But if you can, might be worth a read. Or at least maybe the Sprague, the Camp pastiches or edited versions, which I think remove some of those elements to a degree. I can't confirm because the last time I read the Sprague de Camp version of those stories, wow, it was like 30 years ago or something like that. So, and the last time I read the unedited original versions of the stories was a couple of years too. It was maybe 10 years. But those are fresher in my mind, and they're still... The combat is what sticks. The situations, the combat, the vividness, and the deadliness of the combat, those remain. There's also David Gemmell, as an author, also had a very similar descriptive feel to his combat, but Robert E. Howard is the master of that. So anyway, small tangent, but I'm missing that. I kind of didn't get it. So we'll see. Let's see, what else? And then there's the Tripwire. It was funny that we finally triggered the Tripwire and had events go finally wrong for the King and Rolke. It was fitting that, it would have strained credulity a little bit that we had gone up secretly with the chieftain to the hill and come back without the chieftain, and everything is fine. It's all taken care of. We destroyed the curse. Everybody believe us now. So it was going to be a hard sell anyway. So it's fine that we got attacked. It's really good. I did the thing where I sacrificed myself to protect Anselm. It wasn't entirely because I knew that I had the power to survive the scene and come back. It was partly because I think again, we go back to the camaraderie. This session I felt more camaraderie with my fellow player and with the player character. So both with Anthony and Anselm. And so, Ingolf has already failed before, so he needs to be this to work. Anselm was the key to getting this whole situation resolved, because Anselm took point in the conversations since the start, and it was Anselm who convinced Ivo to help us, and then convince Werther to go along with this whole plan. Had it not been for Anselm, I wouldn't have been able to convince anybody, and so I would have had to take a more active hand myself. I probably would have ended with me trying to kill Werther at some point, which was my original plan, right? We kill Werther now and we leave Ivo in charge of the town. And so at this point, faced with certain death, and to a degree armed with the knowledge that I can still come back from this, I decided, you know what, I'll sacrifice myself. I'll make sure he gets away. So that's what I did. And luckily enough, he survived, which makes for a nice epilogue. I could picture this guy, in fully rent clothing and armor and blooded from head to toe, coming down. Maybe he was buried and clawed his way out of a grave, or maybe he was impaled and somehow managed to, I don't know. I don't think it would have impaled a corpse, but he manages to survive. It's the magic. I think he got it through Amborion the last time. I can't remember how he got it, but in some way, the magic of the knights keeps him alive. And it is a gift of Amborion. I'll correct that. It is a gift of Amborion. So that's why he survives. And I kind of like this, Revenant, like, how did he make it? He was dead. Well, yeah, it's magic. So he's back. So I kind of like that. So anyway, final thoughts. So let me check my notes again. So it felt a little bit less personal. Might have been a function of time, because we like to take our time. This might be just us as players. We like to really inhabit these characters, and so maybe we were a little bit rushed there, but it was fine. It was the trade-off was the camaraderie and the greater focus and awareness. I can now relate exactly what happened to everybody, because I was really alert and not focused in on myself at all times, so I could pay attention fully to what Anthony was doing. So that was good. Bit frustrated because I didn't get my desperate Robert E. Howard combat, but it's okay. I've had desperate REH combat in Blood and Bone and other systems, so bummer that I couldn't get it here, because I would have wanted to see the system put through its paces. Maybe we had been a little bit less lucky with those dice rolls. Maybe there would have been more of a back and forth, right? And that would have been interesting to see. Again, Ron has said a million times, this is not a combat system. This is a system for killing. So that's different. But even then, killing supernatural entities, I would have liked to see the situation develop where the conclusion was, we need to kill this man, and it's not a supernatural thing. I was almost working myself up to killing Werther, or trying to kill him. And it would have been interesting to follow through on that, because that's where the big thing is, right? It's as Ron himself has said, it's not even the killing of the guy himself, it's the getting to the point where you make the decision that this guy has to die and I have to kill him. And so I didn't get that. And that's too bad. But hey, the guys have always said, well, we need to do at least 2 ventures each, and then we reassess if we're going to keep going or not. So, there's always hope. Should I have played Kai? I don't know. I think I made the right choice with Ingolf. It would have been nice for me to portray Kai and portray a different version of Kai, because I had it a bit fresher in my mind at Ingolf. But it was fine. It worked. A question that I have is, now that it's my turn to bat as GM, is how long can we keep making ventures until they become repetitive, right? What's the longevity of this game? I don't have an answer for that yet. Can we keep doing this over the long haul and make it feel different and not repetitive? That's a good question to ask, or at least to keep in mind as we go forward. I think the fact that we turned it around and did the rotatory GM might provide longevity, because I don't think we think alike in terms of adventure prep. So that might, I don't know how I would have been designing adventures one after the other under specific constraints. Maybe it would have become repetitive sooner. It hasn't become repetitive yet, but I don't know. That's just a question. I don't have a specific answer. It's just something to keep in mind. The fact that the components change and switch around hopefully keeps it fresh, and my different visions as compared to the other guys should keep it a little bit fresh, I hope. The flip side of that is that, again, I didn't get to play all the characters. This is the first time I think we've played somebody else's character after Ivan had played it. And I don't know if the amount of time that passed between sessions was enough, or was too much rather, to where you cannot contrast the different portrayals, because I think that's important, right? Had we preserved one GM format, then maybe we'd have gotten a chance to go through more characters and see them developing in different directions and see different voices brought into an interpretation of a character. So I think I don't think that I did such a good job with Ingolf in that respect. I would have liked to see that evolve. Maybe in the next adventures we'll get a chance to see the characters evolve at the hands of somebody else. Maybe someone will play Hadric, who's been played twice, so maybe a third time would be an interesting by a different player this time. So that's something we've done where we stand to see how much have we affected the experience by just doing rotatory GMs. So that's it. I've rambled on for half an hour and it's my turn to bat, so I gotta do some reading again of these rules and see if I maybe can get my head wrapped around making some new ventures that feel new, and hopefully we'll get that soon, depending on Anthony's schedule. So thanks for listening, and we'll see you around. Bye-bye.